Sometimes in my build videos, I get asked the question, what does this build synergize with as far as the other party members? And I thought, heck, it'd be a good idea to do a video on the archetypes that I aim for an entire party. And it's going to look something like this. So in this video, we're going to go over each role, and I'm going to show you a few examples of my favorite builds. But just a quick heads up, there are some classes that are completely left out of this video, and I do apologize for that. But before we get started, if this is your first time with the channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you're already a part of the channel, go ahead and let me know what your favorite, say, party composition is with each role and kind of define them briefly. Don't go crazy like I'm about to do and give a bunch of examples, just like your favorite #1 party setup. But alright, let's get started. Now, the first role that is up that we're going to discuss is the Frontline Marshal character. I didn't say this in the intro, but we are going to stick to pure class examples, but we will talk about multi-classing as well. But if we included multi-classing, this list would be very long, and I've limited myself to just 4 examples, like the standard party size. So, first example here is going to be the Battle Master for a Frontline Marshal character. And what do I expect, again, out of this role? Well, I want them to get up into the face of the enemies, be able to survive, and then wreak havoc in whatever way possible, either by doing a bunch of damage or some sort of crowd control. None better, as an example, than the Battle Master here. Now, so as far as gear is concerned, I'm just putting out some very basic stuff that I think just synergizes with this role that we're talking about. And the flawed Helldust set here that you get in Act 2, I think works perfectly for a frontline character. The Everburn Blade, you get this in the prologue on the Netheloid ship. This is just a great two-handed greatsword, or a greatsword, two-handed weapon, a greatsword for this type of role here. Now, what makes the Battle Master so good? Well, they have Action Surge at level 2. So as far as their action economy, fighters are amazing, and they only get better because at level 11 they get that improved extra attack, meaning they get 3 swings. So for a frontline character, you can't really ask for much more. But on top of that, Battle Masters just have so much utility as far as how they use their weapon. You can inflict fear with their menacing strike here. You can disarm targets, you can knock them prone, you can do a fainting attack. You also get some things like rally, so you can do a little bit of temporary hit point healing as well. But don't think you just need to be pigeonholed into using your greatsword or whatever weapon you have all the time. A fighter here is perfect for the Titan String Bow because you can bump up your dexterity a bunch, and then you can also max out your strength modifier as well, and this will be a great ranged option. Now, when it comes to the Battle Master fighter here, feats I like to usually pick, always just something like Great Weapon Master. I think this fits this role perfectly. Battle Master, this is like the easiest go-to as far as, again, filling out that frontline martial character. Now, the next example of a melee character is, of course, the Paladin. I'm going with the Vengeance Paladin here, but Paladins are they have different strengths than that Battle Master. One of them being a high charisma modifier, meaning not only are they on the front line of battles, but they're on the front line of just normal social conversations. They get a lot of good benefits from having a lot of charisma, and just being a Paladin in general makes it really easy talking to a lot of NPCs. But another thing Paladins get that is just excellent is Divine Smite at level 2. This makes them a single target just destroyer, and that's perfect again for the front line. Not only that, the Vengeance Paladin, get out of here, Steelwatch. Not only that, they get these they get their aura, so Aura of Protection, an Aura of Courage. That's going to help anybody else in the front line, but it also just protects themselves. In addition to just being a paladin, you get spells. So you get something like Misty Step, you get something like Haste. You can give yourself advantage with using Vow of Enmity. It is perfect for the paladin here. Now, some of the feats that I picked, same as before with like Great Weapon Master, but I also took Warlock Initiate to get Booming Blade, which is like a mini Divine Smite that's a cantrip. It's amazing. And also gave myself Eldritch Blast for, again, a little bit of a ranged option there. But that's a pure paladin. There are so many iterations on the paladin that fill out this role even better. Sorkadin, so going like half sorcerer, half paladin. You're going to get the extra attack and the divine smite from paladin, but you're going to get a crazy amount of spell slots from sorcerer. It's an amazing combination. one that I think everybody is probably familiar with. You can also throw in a little bit of Warlock, Hexblade. That way you don't need to worry about your strength modifier. You can just solely dedicate your martial prowess and your spellcasting prowess all off of charisma. The synergy is it's almost like too good to ever pass up. And again, if we went down the multi-class rabbit hole, we'd be here for quite a while, and I have more Resident Evil 9 to play. So the next example I want to show off is the Barbarian here. Now you could go with Berserker for this, or you could go with Giants Barbarian. And that's because of the throwing build. Technically, it kind of works as like a ranged martial character, kind of fits in that second category, but because it's strength based, I figured we just throw it up in this just regular martial category. But some things that you really need to get this build going, Ring of Flinging, and then as far as from your feats, you really need to pick up Tavern Brawler. This is somewhat bugged, or it works differently in Baldur's Gate 3, where you're going to get your strength modifier like doubled on your throwing attacks. And it just does a crazy amount of damage very early on. This is one of the best builds, especially for honor mode. All these builds are meant for honor mode and tactician mode, but this is like a staple that I think a lot of people are very familiar with. But with Berserker, you need to pick up something like the Returning Pike very early on at like one of the goblin camps, and this will always bring that weapon back to you. But Karlach here, she is that giant barbarian. I think it takes a little bit longer to get going than the Berserker. Berserker at like level 3 is very powerful, and it kind of just stays that way the entire game. Giant here, you gotta wait till they get their elemental cleaver, and then they become a throwing monster, as well as being able to like give other characters the boot, enemies, and just kick them off edges and stuff. Very satisfying, very fun. But this is definitely a go-to build of mine, and it kind of double dips as in being in the front line and then being at range as well, but I feel like it deserved to be in this this first role category that we were discussing. The last example I want to show off is just the Hexblade Warlock in general. Kind of similar to the things we were talking about with the Paladin, where Spellcaster. So we get a lot of good spells here. Something like we get Booming Blade as a cantrip, but we also get Hunger of Hadar. And that's something the other spellcasters or the other frontline characters aren't really delving too much into, is AoE damage, area damage. They're all very much single target focused. But if you go with the Hexblade here, you have something like Hunger of Hadar to work with to like almost lock down an entire area. Also, Shadowblade. I mean, I could have mentioned this with the Paladin as well. Shadowblade is crazy good, especially on Hexblade here. Again, the only spell or the only ability modifier that we need to worry about is Charisma. And it's very simple to play and very powerful. A lot of survivability with the Hexblade as well. Maybe it takes a little bit longer to get going than the other examples, but man, this guy can stay in the front line. They'll eventually be summoning up their own minions, and it's just... And at times, yeah, the Hexblade can seem a little bit broken, because obviously Shadowblade's amazing, but they can give them something like the Undermountain King. This is all like Act 1, Act 2 equipment, which is going to reduce the roll you need for critical strikes, and just an absolute monster here. Love the Hexblade, very strong for that martial character. Same thing as the Paladin, where this can also just be the face of your party as well. But those are a few examples of the martial characters that I like to use. All of them are excellent in the front line, and I did leave a couple of classes out. Something like Monk is actually really good in the front line as well, but it's just not something I gravitate towards. Again, this is just my list and kind of, again, the classes that I envisioned in my mind before I started playthrough, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to do that, and usually these are like the top 4 that I go for. But let's go ahead and move to the ranged martial side, usually focusing on dexterity and probably like a bow or hand crossbows for their damage. So the next role I want to discuss is that ranged martial side, again using hand crossbows, or any type of bow. This is that archetype. I also want this character here, whoever they are, to be able to lockpick, so doors, chests, stuff like that. This character is the one who gets all of the special arrows. So arrow of many targets. This lets them do AoE damage and will absolutely wipe the floor of a room with a bunch of mobs on it. Crazy. Always pick these up or buy them from vendors. It'll make your life, again, a lot easier. Also, dragon slaying arrows. If you are familiar with Act 3, definitely stock up on these. And then I just have the fire arrows here to show that there are elemental arrows as well that you should just, again, be giving them all to this archetypal role here. And the first role or class that I want to show off with that fills out this role is the Swords Bard. And that is mainly just for slashing flourish. They can target the same target twice with one action. That is insanely good. On top of that, they can use their bonus action for another shot. This is definitely the character here, the Swords Bard, where I do 2 hand crossbows. Again, we're getting a lot of strikes in with being able to utilize our action and our bonus action. On top of that, bards are kind of jacks of all trades, which means they can do spell casting as well. They have powerful spells like haste, very self-sufficient. They give your entire party Song of Rest, so they get an extra short rest. That is really good for something like a fighter, if you have a fighter in your party. They also can do like Long Strider, a little bit of healing, a lot of control spells as well. Bards are crazy good, but the Sword Bard here, again, this kind of fills the role of being able to be a lockpicker and then doing damage from range. Love the Swords Bard for that. Kind of similar to Hexblade, where this is just very, very powerful in Baldur's Gate 3, maybe on the side of like, maybe a little overpowered in some senses. But my favorite, okay, maybe not my favorite, but definitely one of my favorite, is the Gloomstalker Ranger. This is just one of the best bow users in the game because very early on, at level 3, they get Dread Ambusher. At the beginning of every combat encounter, they get their Dread Ambusher shot. So very early on, they're doing 2 attacks with their regular action without something like haste or potion of speed, and it just makes them able to delete targets on that first turn because they come with something like Hunter's Mark as your bonus action. Very powerful. Also, this is one of the best ways to do the whole pass without trace, greater invisibility for that stealth archer assassin. Some things as far as multi-classing that are really good with the Gloomstalker here is just adding fighter for action surge, and then something like assassin from thief. Combining those 3 into the Gloomstalker kit, oof. I think that combination is the first build I technically did when on my first playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 with my buddies, and I was absolutely destroying everything. Felt really good. Feats, and this is the same for the Bard as well, the Swords Bard. Sharpshooter all in. This is like an absolute must. Just going to give you that 10 bonus to your damage with a little bit of penalty to attack rolls, but you can overcome that negative part of the trait really easily, especially by Act 2. But that is definitely a must for, again, all of these ranged characters, is that sharpshooter trait. But Gloomstalker here kind of has that kind of like stealth side, and then just doing single target damage. You give them many arrows, and then they're doing AoE damage as well. Love Gloomstalker. Ranger, as far as a fantasy archetype, definitely in my top 2 favorite ways to play. And it's funny because I think in a bunch of fantasy games, when they have classes, I feel like they always kind of get the Ranger wrong, and that always stinks. It's kind of a hard archetype to explain. It's the jack of all trades, this master of terrain. I don't know, we're not going to get too much into the Ranger. And the last example I want to show off is the Arcane Archer. This was introduced in the final patch, and this subclass is, maybe it's as strong as the Swords Bard because you get these arcane shots which can do a lot of different things. Grasping Arrow here, it's going to stop their movement, but also a little bit of poison damage. You get some psychic damage with Beguiling Arrow. You can just take somebody off the field with Banishing Arrow. And then something like Seeking Arrow, this cannot miss. It goes around corners. It has a crazy tracking. It's really, really strong. And then AoE damage also with Bursting Arrow. And this is just using the whole kit intrinsically. No special arrows, and you get all these great benefits from range. You can also just give them also those special arrows as well. And the Arcane Archer, again, it's fantastic. And then at level 11, because it's a fighter, you get that improved extra attack, and just absolute monster as far as doing range damage. Crazy. It doesn't get the benefits of something like Ranger. They have some good spells to work with, you know, Misty Step, giving your team Long Strider. These are really handy, and then you want to take that a step further as far as spells, and you know, bards get everything. So it's not like Arcane Archer does everything, but as far as damage, oof, it's almost like second to none in that like bow category. And I'm trying to think if there's any other examples as far as like this archetype role for my parties. And I don't think so. I think these are just like the main 3 of what, like if I want somebody who's using any type of the bows, I think I just always go with these 3. Some iteration of them. Maybe a little multi-classing, especially when it comes to Swords Bard or Gloomstalker. We'll throw in some multi-classing if, you know, we're doing that for a campaign. But otherwise, yeah, it's usually just these 3, and I'm never disappointed. And remember, these are also your lock pickers because they're going to have intrinsically, or you want to build them to have high dexterity as well. So the next archetype and character role that I like for my parties is that healer support role. And there's no better example than the cleric here. Now this is a light cleric. they're on more of the side of damage, but also some protective utility with a warding flare. So that's really good. But Life Cleric, also amazing for this. And Cleric is the best for this because of all the healing spells they get. Yes, you can go around healing with just using a bunch of potions, but they get all these healings, and then they have a bunch of supportive spells as well. Something like Warding Bond to keep your party alive. Sanctuary is amazing. When they eventually get Hero's Feast, going to give everybody a lot of hit points, and then advantage on your wisdom saving throws. Again, a really amazing utility support character. Also with Life Cleric or Light Cleric here, you got a lot of like good damage spells as well. Something like Fireball, your Divinity Charge or your Channel Divinity and Radiance of Dawn. This is excellent. Of course, there is Spirit Guardians. Just always cast Spirit Guardians. Amazing. And then at level 1 here, Guiding Bolt to give somebody advantage on a target that's inflicted with Guiding Bolt. Excellent. Gear. Don't usually talk about gear too much, but to make a really overpowered healer very early on. This crown, this is pretty good. But these Hellrider's Pride. So when you get to the Grove, let Zevlor get knocked out or knock Zevlor out yourself and steal these gloves off him. There are 0 consequences for that, and you get these amazing gloves, which will basically, every time you heal somebody, you're going to be giving them a blade ward. And that is very powerful in Act 1. There's also something like the boots of Aid and Comfort. We also have the Whispering Promise, which is kind of like giving Bless, again, when you heal, and you get this from Zevlor if you talk to him in the Grove. Or not Zevlor, sorry, Volo. You talk to Volo in the Grove, and you can buy this ring off him. There are just so many pieces of equipment that make having a dedicated healer really worth it. A lot of, I would say, compounding effects for when you heal. You know, you're giving a little bit of Bless. You're also giving Blade Ward, again, just from one heal. It's amazing. Light Cleric here, this is just one of my favorites, one of my go-to. I always 100% have Shadowheart in my party, and she is usually some iteration of a Cleric because she just, that is her starting class. Well, it's Trickery Domain, and Trickery Domain's not good. As soon as you can, change her either into a Light Cleric or a Life Cleric. Saying Life and Light, kind of a tongue twister, but yes, first example I needed to show off was the Cleric here, just across the board, amazing. Also a little bit of control, I would say crowd control with Turn Undead. There are a fair amount of undead in this game. And then Command, I didn't mention this when we were talking about Paladin as a frontline character, but Command is an amazing spell, really good to have on our Cleric here. And I always want to make sure that I at least have 2 people in my party that have access to Command, because there's just some bosses that this just makes them, again, kind of like a cakewalk, really trivializes the fight if you could just lock them down with a very simple Command spell. So that is the Cleric out of the way. The next one that is up is very similar, is the Light, or not the, I was going to say Light Domain again, is the Circle of Stars Druid. Absolutely fell in love with this subclass when it was introduced during the final patch, because it kind of plays like a Cleric. You get a bunch of radiant spells, but with Moonbeam's amazing, so maybe a little bit more offensive, but you get a bunch of guiding bolts, you already have a bunch of healing spells as well, you get something like Hero's Feast, you can do guidance, that's kind of the role that we're looking out for here. But in addition to that, you get these starry forms, and you get the archer form, which is going to weaponize your bonus action. You get the chalice, which just makes you a better healer, because every time you do a healing spell, you get to use the chalice here for an additional heal for free. And then you have the dragon starry form. This is probably the best one because it weaponizes your bonus action with like a frontal little cone AoE that does radiant damage. And then your saving throws, they can't roll lower than a 9. Really good. Something I want to mention about starry or Circle of Stars, and then the light, or just any Cleric really, is that radiant damage. This archetype that we're talking about here is excellent for those radiant orb pieces of equipment that you get throughout the game, and just stacking them on this character, because those radiant orbs are going to essentially nuke an enemy's attack rolls, so they're always going to be missing their attacks. A little bit of debuffing there, so I think that fits really well with, again, Circle of Stars and then any form of Cleric. But what are some other support utility roles that you can fit into this archetype? And of course, there is Bard. They just do everything. But I went with College of Lore because of their cutting words. Anytime there needs to be a role that either needs to fail or succeed, you can just use cutting words to almost guarantee that either you're going to have an enemy fail their saving throw on something like hold person, hold monster, confusion. This is one of the best lockdown characters. Again, kind of talking about how command will really trivialize a lot of boss fights. Same goes for if you take a College of Lore and then you're using any of these things like, again, hold person, confusion, hold monster. They're just not going to be able to do anything, and you're almost going to guarantee that you're going to succeed those throws because of cutting word. And then, of course, Bard here, because of Song of Rest and all their healing abilities, they kind of fit into this archetype. And then Haste. Haste is an excellent support. I will say with the Cleric, basically splitting Cleric, so going 6 into whatever domain you want, and then 6 into something like Sorcerer for meta magic. You can then pick up Haste and then Twin Haste, and you'll be like this haste battery. Put yourself in Sanctuary, and then you just sit there and heal. Nobody's going to target you. You're not going to get hit, so you're not going to lose your concentration on yourself and then whoever else, your other person that you're hasting. And it's just like the ultimate support role. It's probably one of my most popular videos on the channel. I'm like, oh, that one really popped off. Really don't know why. I feel like it's pretty, I don't know, pretty basic. Then the last role or build that I want to show off for this archetype is just the Abjuration Wizard here, mostly because of their Arcane Ward, and eventually they are able to share this with other party members, making everybody insanely tanky. It's really easy to keep up your Arcane Ward charges if you're using something like Glyph of Warding. They can also do that more supportive role with Haste, with using Fire Shield. Just really good. I couldn't not put the Abjuration Wizard here because I do feel like they fit that archetype. Definitely maybe a little bit more on the damage side, but the main role for this section here is somebody that's doing a lot of supportive things and then having the ability to keep your party alive with a lot of healing. This is just, again, always a go-to. Usually it's Cleric for me, but these other builds work just fine as well. And the last archetype that I kind of want to go over for, a really good party composition is you need somebody that's just dedicated to pure spell damage. We just did a magic missile build and we're using an evocation wizard. This just does a crazy amount of damage. You kind of got to build a little bit into it, but having somebody that can just do a lot of spell damage, a lot of versatility as far as what spells, because even though this build here is focused around just doing magic missile, we still have things like Cone of Cold, we have Shatter, we have Chain Lightning, and because we're a wizard, well, we can just scribe any scrolls we get to and put that into our spellbook to bring out whenever the occasion arises. And then we also have Haste, so we're very self-sufficient, just an absolute spellcasting powerhouse. I've been on a big wizard kick lately, but don't get it twisted, because for most of my time in Baldur's Gate 3 for this archetype in this role that I have for spell damage, I've always picked Sorcerer, and I have Storm Sorcery here, and that's because without any multi-classing, they get Create or Destroy Water. You pair that with lightning or ice spells, it's going to double the damage. They have their meta magics, which a lot of these are really good. Quicken and Heightened are definitely the best. But I would go with Quicken first because you can only choose one of these early on, and then the other one comes later on. But Quickened here will let you use your bonus action for another spell. So if you have Haste, open up with Create or Destroy Water, and then you can use Quicken for something like Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning, and just blow up everything. It is so much fun. It is so great. Heighten here is excellent. We talked a little bit earlier about locking down characters or bosses with something like Command or Hold Person, Hold Monster. This will give you advantage on those spells, so can do that. The Sorcerer here can do that role as well. Just sorcery in general, or sorcerers in general, they're so freaking good. You could go the Draconic line, you could pick up a certain elemental, fire, ice, lightning, whatever you want, and then for multi-classing, mixing Sorcerer with something like the Tempest Domain Cleric. Very powerful combination. This is all I want this archetype to do, is just as much spell damage as possible. Bonus points if you get some control spells there as well, but damage. And I almost forgot this example here, but the Warlock, either the Great Old One or the Fiend, just making them an Eldritch Blast machine gun. You pick up Agonizing Blast, and then you give them something like the potent robes here, and just using Eldritch Blast it fills that role perfectly. You pair that then with Hex as a bonus action, and I thought when I first started playing the game, this was actually the only damage spellcaster that I really used. I didn't really actually experiment or start playing with sorcerer or even wizard for a while. So the first couple campaigns, it was just this, and it got the job done, and it's a lot of fun. You can also then take it a step further with hold person to guarantee critical hits with your Eldritch Blast. And yeah, Warlock here, the only really important thing that you need to make sure you pick up is Agonizing Blast, some pieces of equipment help, something like potent robes here. Other than that, very, very simple, very deadly. You don't really have to worry about using too many spell slots. You could just focus on counterspelling or using Hunger of Hadar here for AoE damage. And this is very simple, very plain, but really just gets the job done. And then for feats, really just bumping up your charisma. That's kind of same goes for the other spellcasters, whatever your spell modifier is, and then just picking ability improvement and bumping that up. Kind of the way to go. You can go dual wield to have like 2 staves for those extra like spell benefits, either one to your spell save DC or your attack roll, something like that. Those are kind of just the feats that I stick to. Sometimes a Warcaster if I'm really wanting to make sure that I'm concentrating on something and I have advantage, but there's also a lot of gear and equipment in this game that will give you advantage on those concentration saving throws. So if you're going to put in those, then Warcaster really isn't all that special. But anyways, y'all, yeah, that is the video. I really just wanted to make a video on the archetypes that I kind of pick for my party for Tactician and Honor mode. And again, you take any one of these examples and you plug them into play, and I think you're going to have a really smooth like playthrough as long as you're just kind of playing while sort of paying attention. A lot of these builds that we talked about today are just extremely powerful, and again, we'll make Honor mode and Tactician mode just smooth sailing. But this is just the way that I like to play. I left out a lot of classes and a lot of subclasses, so that's why I opened it up to you guys on like, what is your, I guess, ideal party formation for those higher difficulties that just make them an easy time, or just like your favorite in general. It doesn't have to be for Tactician and Honor mode. But that is the video, all. If you've made this far, I appreciate the hell out of you, and I will see you next time. Peace and take care.